Hello, welcome back to my channel, and thank you all for your support and for staying with me over the past while. Jacob's undercover operation to monitor the plasma ring case still has not produced any clear results, but Grayson is already drowning in fear. He is anxious, shaken, and trapped in a constant state of panic. Grayson's greatest fear is no longer being exposed. It is the moment he realizes he has gone too far to ever turn back unscathed. Some mistakes begin as nothing more than a small compromise with circumstance, a quiet step backward taken just to preserve the last fragment of control under the crushing weight of money, power, and desperation. But in the world of Fairmont Crest and Garland Memorial, no compromise is ever truly small. Every choice leaves a mark, every silence carries a cost, and every secret eventually comes to collect the debt it has patiently been waiting for. Grayson has reached exactly that point where a man no longer knows what he fears more, being exposed by others or being crushed by his own conscience. He once believed that the most terrifying thing about the plasma ring, or more precisely the plasma network, was the sophistication of the way it operated, its ability to turn educated, respected, outwardly decent people into obedient links in a chain. But now, the thing that terrifies him most is realizing that this system does not merely want his silence. It wants his soul, his loyalty, and in the end perhaps even his life. Grayson's regret did not arrive loudly. It did not come like an explosion, but like a quiet crack spreading wider day by day, through every suspicious glance, every brief phone call, every cold message that left no room for resistance. He is beginning to understand that he was never truly part of this game as an equal. He was only a pawn chosen at the right moment, kept around because he was still useful and ready to be discarded the moment he became dangerous. The most tragic part is that Grayson realized too late that fear had made him more obedient than any direct threat ever could. His fear of losing everything led him to a place where he may now lose far more than what he was trying to protect. The more he tries to hide, the deeper he sinks. The more he tries to convince himself this is only a phase, only a temporary alliance to survive a dead end, the more he lets himself slide deeper into the web of people who never allow anyone to leave with dignity. Jacob's presence has turned what was already fragile into a living nightmare. Jacob is not like the invisible threats coming from the plasma network because his danger does not lie in direct warnings. It lies in the way he always comes one step closer, always looks one layer deeper, always makes the other person feel as though they are about to be completely read. To Grayson, Jacob is not just a police officer or a man following clues. He is the embodiment of exposure, the living reminder that every weakness can become a sentence. The more Grayson deals with Jacob, the more unstable he becomes. He has no way of knowing how much Jacob already knows, whom he suspects, or how many connections he has managed to piece together. That uncertainty is what tortures him most. A person hiding guilt does not fear a direct blow as much as the gaze of someone who may understand far more than expected. Jacob forces Grayson to live in exactly that state, where every question feels like a trap and every silence feels like an unfinished confession. And then the fatal mistake happened not during some major confrontation, but in a careless moment that seemed meaningless. When Grayson let slip that the contact inside the plasma network was a woman, what he did was more than a simple mistake. It was the moment when his entire line of defense began to crack from within. Some secrets do not collapse because they are attacked. They collapse because the person guarding them has become too exhausted to protect them perfectly. One careless word, one uncontrolled pronoun, one flawed reflex under pressure, and that was enough for the entire underworld he had been struggling to hold together to begin shifting. From that moment on, Grayson no longer feared only Jacob. He began to fear the very people who had once stood behind him. Because in an organization built on absolute silence, the one who reveals the gender of the contact is no longer a trusted link. He becomes a risk that must be dealt with. From there, the name Liar Whitmore emerges like a colder, more elegant shadow than ever before. As department head at Garland Memorial, Leia carries herself like a woman who is deeply familiar with power, discipline, and controlling circumstances with nearly flawless calm. That type of person is the most frightening because they never need to raise their voice to make others tremble. If Leia is truly connected to the plasma network, then her danger lies not only in her ability to conceal, but in the sophistication with which she maintains loyalty through both favor and fear. Grayson may once have lied to himself that Leia needed him, that as long as he remained useful she would keep him safe. But that logic grows more naive by the day. In networks built on manipulation, protection has never meant loyalty. It only means someone still has value. And once that value begins to falter, erasing a pawn is never too difficult for those who have spent their lives behind layers of power and masks. That is why the threat Grayson received was not merely a warning. It was the moment he understood that he had entered the final stage of the game, where no one is allowed to remain innocent enough to believe in fake safe zones anymore. The terrifying part is that he does not know who sent that threat. If it came from Leia, then she has already realized how dangerous he has become and is tightening the reins before he can betray her. If it came from someone else inside the network, then the situation is even more frightening because that would mean Leia may not be the only one controlling everything. And if that is true, then the entire crisis now unfolding is only the visible surface of a structure of power that is larger, crueler, and far harder to break than anyone imagined. That is when Grayson is forced to confront the question that horrifies him most. Is Leia the mastermind behind all of this? Or is she herself only a high-ranking pawn serving an even greater hand in the shadows? The more Grayson thinks about it, the more he feels trapped inside a maze with no clean way out. Silence may keep him alive a little longer, but that same silence also means continuing to live as a slave to fear. Cooperating with Jacob may be the only path to a chance at survival, but it may also be his own signature on a death sentence. This is the beautiful but cruel tragedy of a character like Grayson. He no longer gets to choose between right and wrong. He only gets to choose between different forms of destruction. On one side is a slow death through obedience. On the other is the possibility of a quicker death through betrayal. And for those who have spent so long surviving by balancing between cliffs, the moment of decision is usually the moment they are weakest. Jacob, meanwhile, steps into this storm with a different kind of danger. He is not as panicked as Grayson, nor as cold and unreadable as Leia, but it is precisely his persistence and determination that make the situation more suffocating by the moment. Jacob is no longer chasing the truth as a professional duty alone. He has begun to be pulled into this hunt on a more personal, more obsessive level. The closer he gets to the center, the harder it becomes for him to stop. That makes him sharper, but it also makes him more vulnerable. A man hunting a mastermind often believes he is the one in control, but in networks like the plasma ring, even the hunter may already be walking down a path designed for him. Jacob may believe he is tracking down the person behind it all, but it is entirely possible he is only being pushed deeper into the trap someone else wants him to see. That is what makes this storyline especially compelling. The closer it moves toward an answer, the danger does not lessen. It only changes shape. Jacob's suspicion of Leia is therefore decisive, but also full of risk. If he has truly begun to place her in his sights, then he is moving dangerously close to the heart of the case. But if Leia is only the outer layer of a much larger secret structure, then focusing everything on her may cause Jacob to miss the real hand manipulating both Grayson and Leia. In a story where everyone can be a pawn and everyone can be a liar, correctly identifying each person's level of power becomes a battle of intellect even more intense than any direct confrontation. The smarter Jacob is, the more refined his enemy must be. And that is why viewers have every reason to worry that he may be getting closer to the truth, but not necessarily closer to safety. What makes the entire story most suffocating is that betrayal is no longer just a possibility. It is almost inevitable. The only question now is who will betray whom first. Grayson may turn against the plasma network to save himself, but a man like him would never be forgiven for betrayal. Laya may continue to hold him in place through fear, but a woman as intelligent and cold as she is would also understand that fear eventually turns into recklessness. Jacob may use Grayson as the key to unlock the case, but a cracked key can break both the lock and the hand trying to use it. Every character has reached a point where their choices will not affect only their own fate, but could also bring down the entire false order they are all trying to preserve. To look at it fairly, Grayson is the most blameworthy and the most pitiful figure in this distorted balance. He is not the kind of villain driven by pleasure in power. He is a product of weakness, fear, and terrible choices made in the worst possible moment. But the tragedy is that sympathy cannot erase responsibility. The more afraid he becomes, the more dangerous he may be to everyone around him. The more desperately he wants to live, the more likely he is to push someone else toward death. That contradiction is what makes Grayson a psychological time bomb. A man like him, once cornered, may remain silent until the very end, or may suddenly break the entire game apart just to seize one final escape route. And that leads to the most haunting question hanging over everyone's head: who will fall first? Grayson, because he is to panic to continue playing the obedient pawn. Jacob, because he has gone too deep into a network whose true depth he still cannot fully see. Or Laya Whitmore, if she believes she controls everything while she herself is being watched by an even greater power in the dark. Perhaps the most frightening thing about this story is not who the true culprit is, but the fact that none of them is standing on solid ground anymore. All of them are walking on the thin ice of secrets, lies, and false loyalty. When that ice breaks, there will be no room left for slow redemption or delayed excuses. There will only be the sound of falling, the sound of shattering, and the moment when each of them must pay for the true self they have tried to bury for far too long. Has Grayson realized that one careless slip was enough to start bringing every secret down? By accidentally revealing that the contact in the plasma network was a woman, has he already pushed himself into a dead end? Has Jacob begun to suspect Laya Whitmore, or has he only glimpsed the visible surface of a much larger secret? Did the threat Grayson received come from Laya, or from someone even more dangerous hiding in the shadows? If Laya is truly involved, is she protecting Grayson, or preparing to erase him before he can betray her? And when the betrayal begins, who will be the first to fall?